Welcome back to another episode of the summer series for Between Lines podcast. And today we're just going to be breaking down some of the major offseason moves that have happened in the NBA in pretty much the month of June. And we'll see if anything changes. We'll just drop in future episodes. But for now, we got some moves to talk about. And starting out with definitely the biggest move of likely will be the biggest move of this entire offseason is Giannis Antetokounmpo getting traded to the Miami Heat. So we dropped it like an instant reaction to this a couple of days ago, but now we have some more time. We're going to do like a full breakdown of everything and just share our thoughts. So the official trade was the Heat receiving Giannis and Bobby Portis, and then the Bucks receiving Tyler Hero, Khalil Ware, Jaime Jaquez Jr., Kasparas Rakachonis, and then at the time, 3 first-round picks, which obviously the Bucks used one in this year's draft, as well as a pick swap for the first round and a second-round pick swap as well later on. So a pretty massive move here, and I guess we'll just get into it, Jay. You know, you're the Giannis fan here. What are your thoughts overall on this move for both teams and just Giannis himself?
Yeah, so I think I still like what uh the Bucks were able to get out of it more than what I think Giannis and the Heat are going to end up having as a result of this trade. So initially at the time of the trade, like we talked about it right in the instant reaction, I mentioned like this is this is not the move for Giannis. I think if he was wanted to contend for a championship, and I think I still have that feeling in me. It's just like, okay, if the idea is to contend for another championship and get ring number two and like potentially move up like the list of all time power forwards and things like that, move up your all time rankings overall, I think the move was the Celtics. I still feel that way, and I still feel that way partly because of what the Heat have tried to do to surround him. So we just see the most recent move the Heat have done is re-sign Andrew Wiggins to a new contract, right? So just opted into his player option for this upcoming year, where he's going to get $30 million, and then he has 2 years extended on after that. One at 17 million and one at 60 million, so roughly 2 years for a total of $64 million in the extension if you count this year's player option, upcoming year's player option. So that helps, right? I think he's a good player. That I think he's probably above average player, I would say. That's helping to surround Giannis and Bam. We got the report from Windhorst literally the morning after the trade, or like a day after the trade, that don't expect Norman Powell to re-sign with the Heat unless it was to come at a major discount. Which, if I was Norman Powell, I don't see why I would take a discount. Like if I'm him, I would take a discount if I'm going to a team that I could seriously see winning a championship. They need me as a critical player, but if I'm able to play this role at a slightly lesser like cost, I'm going to be able to like recoup that just in terms of winning a championship, the fame and all that comes with it. If you're Norm Powell, do you really see this team being able to win a championship with you in the role that you're currently in? Obviously, most NBA players, they see themselves in a lot higher regard than probably like the media does. Just like you just need to have that confidence to be that type of athlete and that type of player. But I don't think even Norm Powell is like realistically being, yeah, we're winning a championship. So why would he take a discount when he can get a lot better somewhere else, a lot better deal somewhere else? So I still think we need to see another move I still think we need to see another move that potentially gets them something else in the guard room, in the backcourt area. Like I've seen a lot of reports of them potentially being linked to like LeBron moving there. Obviously we're going to touch on LeBron in a little bit, as he just mentioned. At the time of recording today on June 30th, he just mentioned this. It was just reported this morning from Shams and Rich Paul that he's not going to be in the Lakers anymore. He's looking for a new team. So obviously that's been reported to a lot. Would he be able to come to the Heat? I don't see that happening, like partly because of LeBron's relationship with the Heat in the past. Like there's just issues with there. Would I see that happening again? And I don't see that being the greatest of fits anyways, because I see that being just too much. Too much of the team's going to be packed in the paint. I think they need a little more spacing, specifically around Bam and Giannis. Um, so I would like to see them get something else in the guard, in the guard, in the backcourt room, in the guard area. I think I need to see them fill that out a little bit more. So honestly, like just I think overall, like long story short, based on like what I was just saying, I think the overall trade, I still see it as I don't think it's gonna win. I don't think it's gonna win them a championship. This move by itself is not gonna win them a championship, but I'm gonna hold out hope that a strong front office, not the front office that it's been like over their entire career. I think Pat Riley has been a little bit overrated as a moves maker in the last couple of years. This move is a really good move in trading for a two-time MVP, but you still need to fill out this roster other than that. So that's my thoughts on it for now. Yeah, I just want to hear from you. Like, what do you think? What do you think the Heat need to do to make this a roster that can better contend for a championship in the next coming years?
Yeah, I think they have a lot of work to do. I mean, we've just seen, especially with like the modern NBA, the parity era, where you need like a deep roster to win a championship. That's how the Knicks won this year. That's how the Thunder won in the year before. Two star players just isn't enough to get it done. You need a well built team around those two stars, even with one star, like well surrounded, like the Thunder did, for example. So while they do have their quote unquote two stars, obviously they have the superstar in Giannis, and then they have Bam, who, even though he hasn't made an all NBA team in his career, he's still like an all star level player, Mr. 83 himself. So I think they have their front court kind of locked down. And then they also have like underrated pieces like Bobby Portis getting good like off the bench minutes in for that team would be nice. But at the same time, like kind of like you touched on, they have absolutely nothing going on in that backcourt. Like Davion Mitchell, excellent defender, should not be carrying the ball up every possession or should not be like one of the primary ball handlers for this team. Norman Powell, as you touched on, it's pretty uncertain if he returns to the team. And you said like he need a pay cut to return. And given the fact that like Andrew Wiggins definitely didn't take a pay cut to return to the team, like I don't see how Norman Powell would. He kind of has that leverage, and he could definitely get onto a contending team or be a contributor somewhere else. I mean, he got his first All Star nod last year, averaging like 22 points a game, so he had a good year. And I don't think he's gonna really take a pay cut. I don't blame him. Go chase the bag. And it's not like staying on the Heat would really guarantee a championship or anything by any means. So I think that they really need some work in that front court, or I mean, sorry, the back court, because right now, like their starting lineup is Davion Mitchell. Let's assume Norman Powell stays, but even though he might not, so you don't really have a shooting guard if he isn't there. Andrew Wiggins at the three, and then Giannis and Bam at the 4 and 5. That's a pretty incomplete roster, if you ask me, because outside of that, they have no depth outside of Bobby Portis. So there are really a lot of moves that need to be done. I think like looking at it from Giannis's POV, we kind of already talked about in our instant reaction, and just like you had mentioned, how it doesn't really seem like this is the most, if in terms of just purely from a contending point of view, this wasn't really the ideal outcome. But at the same time, I do kind of see some vision from the front office. Like they could build this team in the next 2 to 3 years to contend down the line, assuming Giannis's injury history doesn't get any worse. That's the one concern I do have, which I mean, he's had his, fair share of calf injuries, especially last year, missing time. So while he is still in like maybe not his athletic prime, he still is an athletic freak, like the Greek freak himself. Even though his back-to-back MVP seasons are in the past, I mean, he's been having some of his like best statistical seasons. I think last year it was like near 60% from the field, like 30 plus points a game, 2 years ago, not last year. Just ridiculous numbers. He's still a top five player. I guess we'll get to that in our rankings in one episode, but still a universal top five player in the world. So I think, the Heat, they kind of have to take the hit for a year. I don't really see how they can contend this year. They'll get some pieces, but I don't think it'll be enough to like be a lock at making the finals, maybe make the conference finals with like a Giannis like Superman type of job. But I'm not going to rule out this team contending in the future. Giannis is a machine. Eric Spoelstra is one of the best coaches of this century. They definitely have the potential to do something great. I just don't see it in the short term.
Yeah, so I honestly agree with what you're saying there. Like, I think if this team is to work and in how it's currently constructed, this team is gonna have to work. It's gonna require one, an Eric Spoelstra masterclass in terms of his coaching ability. We've seen him be able to take players, undrafted players, second round picks, even lower end first round picks, or players that we didn't expect much from in their previous situations, whether it was a different professional team in like the NBA or whether in college we didn't see too much for them. And he's been able to put them in situations that he can maximize the most out of their ability and get them paid on other teams because what other teams have been seeing, oh, this guy can do this, but no, it was really just a specific outcome of being in the Heat culture and having Eric Spoelstra as your head coach and him being a tactical genius and be able to do things like that. I think we're going to need to see a lot from that. We're going to need to see a superhuman effort from Giannis in terms of just carrying the roster. Carrying a roster that isn't great, right? We've already talked about like some of the players that are currently like slated to start for them based on like who they had to send out in the trade. Um, so it's going to require superhuman effort from him to be able to carry the team, both on the offense, more on the offensive end than the defensive end. And in addition to that, we've seen in the last 2 years, like you mentioned, not this past season where he was injured, but the 2 seasons before that. So the 2 seasons where the Bucks had Dame as well. We saw that even in the games where Dame was injured or not, and Giannis had to play by himself with a roster that wasn't that great, maybe not as great as the 2021 championship squad, or even the team right after that made the second round of the playoffs. He put together like a superhuman effort, I would say, in a lot of those games, and it still wasn't enough because the roster wasn't that great around him. And I would say that roster that he had in the Bucks the last 2 years, not before this one, we're probably better than what he has in this Miami roster. Like I'm looking at their starting five right now and just some of their like tax numbers. So like you mentioned, if you can't re-sign Norman Powell next year, starting two guard that's slated to start is Pelle Larsson. Like I'm not sure if you can win a championship with him being your one of your starting five players. Davion Mitchell starting at point guard, that's good, but he's going to be backed up by Drew Smith and then Myron Gardner. Like those are two guys. Myron Gardner's contract isn't even guaranteed anyway, so are you going to potentially only have one guard that has a guaranteed contract for you to back him up right now? The front court, a guy like Simone Fontecchio, he just re-signed recently. Bobby Portis, Nikola Jovic. It would be a lot better if they had Nikola Jokic, but they don't have him, unfortunately. So they have three average players, I would say, in their front court depth. Looking at their free agents right now, Norman Powell, we just mentioned that, more than likely not going to re-sign with them unless it's at a huge discount. Keyshawn Johnson, a guy that like we mostly know him for the dunk contest and like not performing that well in the dunk contest. I don't know if he's a guy that you really want to be like holding out all your hope for him to re-sign and things like that. Vlad Golden, a guy that played on FAU and I think Michigan as well in college, a 7-footer, but he really has a lot to if he's going to be able to develop. Right, he's just a rookie, so if or was just a rookie, so if he's going to be able to develop, you're going to need to see a lot from him before you can like actually rely on him to play like quality bench minutes in place of Bam or like Giannis if one of them is playing the five. Jameer Young, a previous guard, he went to Maryland. Is that a type of guy that you want to be like relying on for like clutch playoff minutes and things like that? Even like coming in for like critical regular season minutes. So it's they have a lot of work to do. Right now, their projected salaries. This is all from Bobby Marks. His projected salary is $191 million right now. They still only have 10 players, 9 players if you don't even count Myron Gardner, who's not guaranteed on the roster. They have 9 players right now that are scheduled or slated to be on their roster going into next season. The luxury tax kicks in at 201 million. Obviously, the Heat haven't been like shy of paying the luxury tax in the past, right? That's an ownership group that has been willing to go into the tax and dip into the aprons when it's needed, which is good. And I think they're definitely going to have to because it kicks in at 201 million. You're not going to be able to sign roughly 5 or 4 players in $10 million. So you're going to be more than likely going to dip into luxury tax. The first apron kicks in at 209 million. They're more than likely going to go into that. You don't have too much in the way of exceptions and things like that. I'm looking at it now. They have the taxpayer mid-level exception at $6.1 million. Who are you really going to be able to get that's going to be that like critical of a player, like that critical of a contributor at $6.1 million? They have a trade exception from a Haywood Highsmith move at 5.6. They have the veteran minimum. It's like first round and second round exceptions, but it's just like the way I'm like it's they're really gonna have to be like grasping and being able to like do a lot of different maneuvers to be able to make this work. I really want to see this work. Obviously, I do want to see Giannis win another championship, and I think it would be great if he could win it in South Beach, a place that really adores their like stars, and they will really show out for them if they're a good team and they're competitive in the playoffs. It's just I'm not sure if I'm not sure if this team has the legs to be able to do that. So I think it's something that they need to they're going to need to do a lot of work in the margins to make sure this move works overall and pays off in the long run. But even those margins, I'm not even sure I could see it being happening. So I guess we'll have to see what happens with it.
Yeah, I guess we're gonna see what happens here, what moves like the front office makes in terms of filling out this roster, because kind of like we both touched on, this is far from a contending team as things stand right now. So let's see what the Heat front office can do here to get some players and pieces that can hopefully get Giannis another championship. A guy who's kind of almost in a way kind of been forgotten about in terms of his legacy, where to me he's pretty much a solidified top 20 player of all time. But in the last 2 to 3 years, he hasn't really done a whole lot in terms of his like legacy accolades, just unfortunately due to injuries and stuff like that. So I feel like a lot of people have forgotten about like the prime Giannis, the peak Giannis, like the arguable, probably second or third best power forward of all time, Giannis. So I hope for his sake he gets another ring. And I guess let's move on to another big move, not as big as the Giannis one, but still pretty major one. We saw LaMelo Ball get traded to the Minnesota Timberwolves, where it was LaMelo Ball being sent over for, in addition to Josh Green, to the Timberwolves. The Hornets received Naz Reid, a 2033 unprotected first round pick, and then 3 first round pick swaps and 3 second round pick swaps. So, I mean, the pick swaps, they're not, it's not in a major move. If it's like at most maybe moving back in the draft, like 5 to 10 spots. So we'll ignore that and pretty much boil it down to Naz Reid and a first round pick. So I think overall, again, this was one that we gave an instant reaction on. So our thoughts are already out there, but kind of just expanding on them. I think I think I've maybe warmed up a little bit to this trade in the sense of like Anthony Edwards at the end of the day, he attracts a lot of gravity and attention on defense, and they need another ball handler. We saw Mike Conley be vital for that, but obviously, like in past seasons, but obviously Mike Conley is very like much past his prime. He's a lot older now, wasn't really playing for the team. So we thought that was going to be Ayo DeSumo. I mean, we saw him receive that 5 year, $112 million contract, which was definitely, I would say it's deserved. He played fantastically in the playoffs, and he's young. You want to lock him down before he goes to another team. And so everything seemed good. And then they go get LaMelo, where it's a bit questionable because LaMelo, he's not a guy that can, at least as far as we've seen in his career, he's not a guy that can like be asked to like play the three or anything like that. Like he's pretty much strictly a point guard, a ball dominant guy. So we're gonna have to wonder what like the lineups are gonna look like, the rotations are gonna be like, because I highly doubt that you start all three of these guards and Anthony Edwards, Adesuno, and LaMelo Ball. Like, I mean, Anthony Edwards is a physical player. Like, he could definitely be asked to like play small forward for some minutes, and I'm sure he could do it. But long term, it's not what they want to do. He's already, he dealt with some injuries in the past season with like the knee injuries in the playoffs. We saw him have the hyperextensions and bone bruises. So putting him into an even more physical like role would not be the move for this team. So I think it's good in that you get another ball handler, take the pressure off of Anthony Edwards. But at the same time, we've harped on Lamelo's shortcomings a lot, so we won't really go too much into it. But we haven't really seen him play a lot of serious basketball. He's been known as like the quote unquote like shot chucker. This year was a good year for him. He was top 20 in the NBA in terms of plus minus. We saw like he can play better when he has a good team around him. So I think that there is some promise for Timberwolves fans, but you just got to wonder, like, was this the right move? You just extended Ayo to Sumo, gave him a massive contract. Now you bring in a guy who's known for being a quote unquote shot chucker. He is good. He's a good playmaker. He close to like not like 8 or 9 assists on the year. But I think there are a lot of questions, and I guess I'll get into the Nas Reed thing after just hearing your thoughts. So what do you think about this trade?
Yeah, I mean, I still think that the Hornets probably got the better end of this deal compared to what the Wolves had to give up and are receiving in LaMelo Ball. Obviously, the Hornets, they seem to be doing an organizational overhaul in the sense that we saw them trade away Miles Bridges to the Suns. We're going to touch on that a little bit too after this discussion, but so I think the Hornets want to go in a different direction of their team, maybe culturally, because they don't really trust either of those two players to be like significant players for them in the long haul, which I would agree with. Specifically in the LaMelo Ball aspect of it, like you mentioned, we've already gone like deep into our distrust with him as a player and things like that, and like some of our like dislikes with his play style and things like that. So I think that's seriously going to have to change if the Wolves want to win a championship with this roster that they've constructed. And I think both that's going to seriously have to change from it's more gonna have to change like from Lamelo himself. Like I don't think you can have a lot of players on the Wolves be able to be like, oh, we can get in his ear and like tell him, oh, you gotta change this style of play, you gotta do this more, you gotta like defer more to like. I think those players being able to tell him that isn't gonna be the thing that changes it. Like he's not. I don't think he's the type of person that's gonna be listening to a bunch of players that not only are they not even like older than him, a lot of these players are probably the same age as him, like slightly younger than him. We have a guy in Anthony Edwards who's their lead player that came in the same draft. I'm not sure their exact ages, but LaMelo Ball is going to be like, hey, you came in the same draft as me. Why do I have to listen to you? As you're not like my elder or something like that. You're not like a veteran player in the locker room that's going to be like, oh, I'm listening to his good wisdom or things like that. Um, it's like they still. I still just don't think this is the move that if maybe you were really worried. I've seen a lot of reports on this, and I've also seen this be disputed by like some Timberwolves reporters. Like people were saying, "Oh, this is going to be like this is just the Wolves' way of making sure their own Giannis saga doesn't happen. Their own star player, superstar player in a small market starts to get fed up with the team because they're not doing enough moves to help them win a championship. So this is sort of like a break glass in case of emergency type move for them, and then boom, they're trying to get another star player just so he doesn't leave and it feels like he's happy. If this was what you wanted to do, that first of all, I don't think that was the issue, anyways. Ant has expressed many times like he loves the city of Minneapolis, like he loves being in Minnesota and things like that, and he loves the team that he's playing with, like he loves a lot of his teammates and things like that. And trading away Nas Reed isn't something that's going to help that. As much as he probably is going to enjoy playing with the Lamelo Ball, I think off the court, I think their personalities, they're obviously really funny guys. Like we talked enough about like their interviews and stuff are going to be really funny and things like that. I think those two are going to vibe in just the sense of like off the court and things like that in the locker room. But Nas Reed was also a guy that he really vibed with and just a player that he really loved. So how is he going to take that aspect of it and him being traded away? Just going through like their roster now and like what they have on the books for next season. Um, they have a lot. It's they're already dipping into the first apron for this, right? They're a few million, like $2 or $3 million over the first apron limit with this move. And you still have only 11 roster spots finished on. You have only 11 roster spots taken up so far. So that means you're already into the first apron. You probably need to sign like 2 to 3 more players to have a filled out roster, anyways. You already, like we mentioned before, they really need to work on that forward rotation. I'm looking at the roster right now. They only have two players listed at center right now. One being Rudy Gobert, and the other being the former rookie, Joan Behringer. Those are two guys. Rudy Gobert, obviously, he has his shortcomings, but he's a guy you can trust to play heavy regular season minutes. In the playoffs, it might get a little bit hairy, but it's still a guy that you can trust somewhat to play some good minutes for you in the playoffs. Joan Behringer, he's a guy that barely played in the playoffs, and it was just like cleanup minutes, garbage minutes, if anything. Can you trust him to be a quality postseason player right now? I don't think so. Can you even trust him to be a quality regular season player? We'll have to see. So they're going to need to beef up that center rotation. They have plenty of guards listed on here. Obviously, Anthony Edwards, LaMelo Ball, Adesumo, Josh Green, another guy coming over in the LaMelo trade. Just another guard for them to add. So they really need to work on that front court, specifically the forward and center rotation. Just beef that up. They just need more bodies in there in general. It doesn't look like they're going to be able to get many above average guys with what they have. We'll see how many like different taxpayer exceptions, trade exceptions they can work with potentially to get some more guys. But I mean, like I think we both are expressing the same thing. They really need to build out this roster a little bit more if they think it's going to win a championship. But just at the core of it, LaMelo, I don't think can be. I don't think he can be a true number two on a real championship team. That's just my thoughts on it. But yeah.
Yeah, I think like pretty well said. Where there are a lot of like now holes in terms of the front court for the Timberwolves here. A lot of like they really don't have a front court presence, honestly. I think it just boils down to that. And so we'll see what they can do. Kind of now shifting to the Hornets side of things. I really do like this trade for them. It just seems like they've kind of transitioned into, they have their star rookie in Con Knipple, who had a fantastic regular season, led the league in 3 pointers, like pretty ridiculous for a rookie to do that. And then they have Brandon Miller, who he's gotten over his injuries and missed time. He's finally coming into his own, averaging like 20 points a game, playing very well. And then also, a guy who's been underrated on this team is Kobe White, who was traded from Chicago to the Hornets during the year. And we saw on a pretty small, like he was playing 19 minutes a game for the Hornets because by the time he was there, I mean, LaMelo was the starting one pretty predominantly. And on those 19 minutes a game, he was averaging 16 points a game. So he's playing very well in a very small minute load. So I think I'm excited to see what he can do as a potential starter. I think we're going to see, what this team is going to do. I think now adding Naz Reid gives you a lot of versatility on the front court. Musa Diabate and Ryan Kalkbrenner are very good physical bigs, good rebounders, offensive rebounders specifically, but they have no real ability to stretch the floor. So now, like, you have the flexibility of like, hey, do we still want that physicality and Musa Diabate ability? Do we consider starting Naz Reid at the four? Like he is a bit of an undersized center. Technically, he's 6'9", so he could play some 4 minutes. I'm sure he's a great 3 point shooter. So that gives like Charles Lee in the squad like a lot of flexibility. So I think that is, and then touching on the Miles Bridges trade that we briefly touched on, they traded Miles Bridges in a first round pick to the Suns in exchange for Grayson Allen, Royce O'Neal, and another first round pick. So I think that this is a fantastic move for the Hornets. Seems like pretty much there's entering this new era. Like they want to build around Brandon Miller, Con Knipple, and Kobe White, that trio there. And like Miles Bridges doesn't really fit that picture. He's a bit more of a ball dominant guy. He can't really do much off the ball, average defender at best. LaMelo Ball we already touched on. So I think getting these guys like Grayson Allen is a fantastic catch and shoot 3 point shooter. Royce O'Neal is like a very versatile player, good two-way player. He can hit the 3 pointer, also get rebounds and steals. I think just like adding in these players that can fill in the catch and shoot roles and the defensive roles can make this Hornets team a pretty good young and like up and coming team. I mean, this could even be a hot take, but I could see the Hornets finishing as like a 6 seed in the East, for example, this year. Like they have a really good young team going forward that I'm excited to watch. So I just love the way that the Hornets front office is kind of transitioning from like, they tried the LaMelo experiment for a couple of years. I'll give LaMelo some benefit of the doubt. They had a pretty rough roster all around him for a good amount of the years, but at the same time, if someone is truly a star, like they can ascend past that roster and carry them to the playoffs and stuff like that. So they moved on from the LaMelo era, the Miles Bridges era, kind of just like randomly on Miles Bridges. I saw that like he's like the third leading scorer in like Hornets history all time, which is ridiculous to think about. So just moving on from one of their goats, I guess, if you want to call it, now into this newer era with Kobe White, Con Knipple, Brandon Miller, Naz Reid, Musa Diabate. I like where this team's headed, and they're going to be fun to watch for sure.
Yeah, and speaking of, like you said, Miles Bridges being one of the leading scorers in the Hornets history, like name a singular significant bucket from Miles Bridges' entire tenure there. Like the most significant
Nothing.
play I could think of Miles Bridges ever doing there is probably one of his like regular season dunks or something. Obviously, he's had a lot of crazy posters, but other than that, probably the clutch block at the end of the Heat playing game,
Yeah.
which again was just a 9-10 playing game, and they proceeded to get blasted in the next playing game to not actually make the playoffs. So I mean, we've touched on this trade enough, I think, in our instant reaction one. So we can move on to some other ones. But like you said, I think the Miles Bridges move and the LaMelo Ball move signals like, okay, like this last couple years of mediocrity overall from the Hornets, I think, which is it's important that an ownership group can recognize this. Obviously, moving off a different ownership group, moving off of the Michael Jordan ownership group, so they're obviously like pretty clear on like they want to make some changes, and they want to change up what they want to change up the formula they've been using so far, which I 100% agree with, wholeheartedly agree with. I think this is the right move. I think they moved off of certainly one player in LaMelo Ball that I don't think you can trust when it comes to important, significant winning, like when it comes to winning significant games in the playoffs. A guy like Miles Bridges, we haven't even seen him in like significant games, but like I don't feel like he's another player. He's a player that's going to be helpful in those types of situations, anyways. And I think you have a guy in Con Knipple, a guy in Brandon Miller. You're bringing in a guy like Nas Reed. You're bringing in two sharpshooters and Royce O'Neal and Grayson Allen. You're obviously going to have like some rookie Kobe White. We mentioned having some rookies like develop from the past year, having a rookie from this year. So I think they're going to have. They might start a little bit slower, but like you mentioned, I think they could be better this upcoming year than they were last year, just by this like addition by subtraction type of movement. So yeah, I think that's gonna do it for those two deals. So let's move on to some of the other deals that we've had most recently in the last couple of days. Let's move on to one of the star point guards in the Western Conference. Previously, as one would a lot of people would consider superstar point guard in Ja Morant, moving from the Memphis Grizzlies, being traded to the Portland Trail Blazers in exchange for Chris Murray and Jeremy Grant. So let's just get your thoughts on the trade. Like initially, obviously, I don't think there's any picks like mentioned in the trade as far as I know. So this is just a guy that was going head to head with the eventual champion Warriors in a playoff series. A guy that took down Anthony Edwards in the series right before that. A guy that was going toe to toe with LeBron James and AD in one of their like best playoff runs as a Laker duo. And all that and that entire like Memphis era, that new grit and grind era, just sort of ends in this like unceremonious ending with a lot of their best players getting traded off for draft capital, and a guy like Ja Morant not even getting traded for draft capital, just getting traded for like matching salaries. So I'll give you my thoughts on it in a sec, but like, what are your thoughts on the trade for the Grizzlies and the Blazers overall?
Yeah, I mean, I just like it's kind of crazy to see, like the Grizzlies. We remember that fun time in like 2022, 2023, just like with Dylan Brooks and Desmond Bane and like Ja Morant. They were the two seed at one point. They peaked pretty high. And now just like the whole team has been blown up. Like now it's, they're gonna build around Cam Boozer, and good for the Grizzlies, getting off of the burden that is Ja Morant for that franchise. I mean, we've seen him play 79 out of a possible 246 games in the last 3 seasons. He's missed a lot of time, some of it due to injury, a lot of it due to like personal conduct issues off the court. So looking at it from the Trailblazers side of things, I don't get the movement for the Trailblazers. Like I think they already, so Damian Lillard, like he's going to be returning from the Achilles tear. He's hopefully he'll get to be a key contributor, playing good minutes. Like his ability to just like shoot from anywhere is unbelievable, and hopefully he returns to that version of himself. But you got to realize that there's a chance that he's gonna have to take a bit of a step back. He's gonna need some like reps to get back to his full version of himself. He just missed like over a year, so um, adding in another guy who's ball dominant but can't really do much with the ball, like in terms of like Ja Morant is an unbelievable athletic player. He's an athletic freak. We've seen all the highlights of like the almost dunks, the crazy dunks, all that stuff. He's a great athletic player, but at the same time, he's very ball dominant and can't do much without the ball. That's the same problem that they have with their current star in Denny Avdia. So I don't really like the fit between these two guys. Like, how can they both even be on the court at the same time where none of them shoot above like 31, 32% from three? I don't really see it working in terms of fit. And then in terms of the Grizzlies side of things, they received like Jeremy Grant, Chris Murray. Honestly, like I don't even care what they received. I'm just happy that they got like off the Ja Morant burden. Like good for them. It's a reset. They're gonna have their younger team here. They got obviously the number 3 pick in Cam Boozer. They're gonna build around him, who I think is gonna be fantastic in the NBA. His skill set should translate very well. And then their other rookie from last year, Cedric Howard. He had a surprising rookie year out of nowhere, played very well. So good on them for moving forward. But from the Trailblazers point of view, I don't really see I guess the best way to put it is I don't see how this trade makes them much better. Like, sure, you're getting a star in Ja Morant, if you want to call him a star, but I don't think it complements what they have right now. Like, you want to build around a guy like Denny Avdia, who's, I believe he's played 4 or 5 years in the NBA. He's still on a relatively cheap contract, 4 years, 55 million, one of the better contracts in the league. So build around him instead of getting another ball dominant guy who can't really contribute off the ball. So bit of a questionable fit overall, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think, like you mentioned, it's good for the Grizzlies to realize, okay, this era of this whole Ja Morant, Dylan Brooks, Desmond Bane, Triple J, like all these guys, like it was enough to get you some quality, good regular season wins, which is important, and then get you a relatively high seed in the playoffs. And then, but what were they able to do off that really? Like they weren't able to capitalize on having a second seed in any of the years. Obviously, I think they had the second seed in the like year they lost against the Lakers for sure. They lose to a seven seed in the Lakers. Obviously, one of the more talented seven seeds we've ever seen in the NBA that ends up making the Western Conference Finals. But still, you are heavily favored, or at least favored to win that series. It was definitely closer than some 2-7 series before, but we've seen they weren't able to get that one done. We saw in the previous year against the Warriors, they weren't able to get that series done either against one of the weaker Warrior teams. Out of the four championship Warrior teams, that has to be considered the weakest one. And you're going up against a legendary player in Stephen Curry, but like you just weren't able to like get that done there. And I think it's like I'm pulling up like Josh stats now, and you mentioned this, so I won't go like too much into it, but like first couple years in the league, he's playing 67 games, 63 games, 57 games, and then 51 or 50 or 61 games. So those are how many games he played in the first 4 years of his career. Then the last 3 years, he plays 9 games 3 years ago, 9 out of 82. He plays 50 games 2 years ago, and then he just plays 20 in this most recent year. And in this most recent year, there was a lot of issues with like the team and things like that. He was like sort of sending indirect shots at them through the media and like his Twitter and things like that. And we know there's been plenty of off the court issues. Like we don't need to go back into all that, but is this really the type of guy that you want to be bringing into a locker room, a young locker room in Portland that seems to be going on the right path? They seem to be having a lot of young players that are about the right thing. They're bringing them together to try and make the playoffs. They're very close to this year to making the playoffs. So it's just I'm just unsure. Or they did make the playoffs. I forgot, but like even like this year, just being very close and like obviously they weren't able to like take down the Spurs, the eventual Western Conference champions, but still like can they build on that for the future? Obviously, having a guy like Dame Lillard coming back in on a very reasonable contract, that's probably why you were able to make this move in the first place. A guy coming in Ja Morant, who has a significantly sized contract. Um, so I don't know how this is gonna work in terms of the Blazers like overall and like their structure. Like you have like we mentioned, we have Dame already. You have Drew Holiday who has a player option, which I'm pretty sure he's gonna opt into. So that's two guards already. A guy like Shaden Sharp, who's like a guard slash forward, like but he's taking significant like some ball handling minutes too, I'm sure. Scoot Henderson, a guy that you drafted third overall like 3 years ago, I think isn't he someone that you want him having the ball to make sure he can develop? That's probably why you brought in Dame alongside him to be able to mentor him. I'm sure he was helping mentor him like this year while Dame was like sidelined with the Achilles injury, but still, like, don't you want like Scoot Henderson on the ball more to be able to develop that his abilities? And the last thing is like if you're having, let's say I think I saw some report today that's saying the Blazers are planning to start Ja Morant alongside Damian Lillard as their two guards, which is it's fine, it makes sense. And in terms of like a fit like that probably works because like Dame's a really good like shooter, so he can space the floor, and like no team's gonna respect Ja from like his shooting ability, and which makes sense. Like Ja hasn't been like a great shooter ever. Like his 3 point percentages last season, he shot 23% from three. Previous year, 30%. The previous year, 27%. The previous year, 30%. Like he's never cracked 35% from three in any of his seasons. So it's just not a great basketball fit, I don't think, for the Blazers. I guess it's just a swing on like this guy has so much athletic upside and athletic potential. Can we like get more out of that? But like even that, like some of that, just so many of the injuries he's had over the last couple of seasons, has some of that athletic ability diminished over time? Has some of that waned over time? Are you even getting the peak athletic job that you had during that like 21, 22, 23 seasons? Um, so it's just I just have a lot of questions with how this where this move is going to go for them, and how much it's going to pay off for them in the long run in the Blazers.
Yeah, I mean, like kind of like you touched on, they have a lot of young talent where I mean they were the seven seed this year. Yeah.
Yep.
And they like, credit to them, they kind of overperformed given their roster. They just saw a
Mhm.
lot of young guys rise. like the ones you mentioned, like Denny, of course, and then Scoot Henderson, Shaden
Like most
Sharp.
people didn't even expect them to beat the Suns in the playing game, and they were able to
Yeah,
do that
like
at least.
we like none of it. We didn't pick that, for example,
Yeah.
in our prediction. So, and even a guy like Donovan Clingan, like they have a lot of good young pieces on that team that like Damian Lillard is a fantastic mentor. Like, he's the type of guy you want. Obviously, he's going to be contributing on the court, but even if he doesn't, like just in terms of like a locker room presence, like he's a leader that you'd want in there for sure. We've seen him take like the Blazers to like deep runs in the playoffs, even though it hasn't really amounted to much. Like he wasn't given much, so he has the type of grit that you want in a leader. Same thing with like Drew Holiday. Like of course he's a little beyond his peak years, but he's still a good defender. He is a great veteran. And now you bring in someone who's had like a lot of drama, which everyone knows about, so we won't really get into. But I just don't like the match for this young Blazers team that is looking for like another mentor, another experienced vet. And if anything, they're losing one of their vets in Jeremy Grant. He quietly had a nice season for them, like 19 points a game. He's in his 30s. He's a good veteran for the team. So now he's going to be mentoring Cam Boozer and company in the Grizzlies down there. So I guess let's move on to another move here, or actually not a move, but we're gonna go to the Lakers side of things. Where talking about Austin Reaves, he got a contract extension there, the 4 year, $185 million contract, very big number there. And what do you think about it? Overpay, underpay, just right? What's the vibe there?
I think I think it's an overpay for what you're going to be getting from Austin Reeves. And now I don't want to diminish Austin Reeves because we we just did one of the recordings for our player rankings episode, and we talked about Austin Reeves as a guy that's potentially going to be on the fringe. Is he or is he not going to be in a top 30 type player? Watch the video to see if he's in one of our top 30s, but he's a guy that he's definitely around that range. There's no like denying that. And there are guys around that range that have even larger contracts than him. So I don't want to diminish that in the sense that he's not worth that at all. But I think for what you're getting from him and what's going to be required of him now that we know. So obviously we're recording this on June 30th, and we know earlier this morning LeBron James, him and Rich Paul announced like via Shams that he's not going to be on the Lakers next season. So do you have a hole in terms of the ball handling capability on the Lakers and the ability to set up offensive possessions? You obviously have Luka Doncic, so you're not going to be too much worried about that. And Austin Reeves can sort of thrive as like a side creator, like off the ball and things like that. But he's gonna have to be able to work on his defensive ability now. A guy like LeBron, as old as he is, and as like much different than he was in his prime, especially in regards to his defensive ability. He was still able to, for very like small batches at a time, turn up the defensive intensity and turn up the defensive effort and make sure, okay, if this is a clutch possession in a regular season game or if this is a playoff game. We saw in the playoff games this season, obviously it amounted to one series win. They weren't able to get another series win, but they were still able to beat the Rockets, and a team that even without Kevin Durant, some people still favored the Rockets to beat them. I still thought the Rockets were going to win the series, even like without like Kevin Durant playing most of it, and they were still able to get that win. And we saw his defensive effort like charged up tremendously. So all that to say is, if you're not going to have that there, and you're going to have a lot of guys, Marcus Smart opted out of his player option, more than likely going to be a free agent. I don't see him re-signing like another larger contract with them. I would have expected him just opt into the player option and extend if he was going to do that. A guy like DeAndre Ayton, he's opting into the player option. He's not like one of the most feared like defensive rim protectors out there. So it's going to put more effort on the perimeter guards for the Lakers to be able to play better defense if your backline isn't as strong. So I mean, I want to turn it over to you now. So it's just like my overall thought on it is I think it's a little bit of an overpay just for what he's going to be able to bring and what's going to be necessary for the Lakers. But that doesn't mean he can't improve in like certain things like his defensive ability and defensive effort and things like that. So he could make it worth it overall in the long term. But for now, I'm going to say that I think it's a little bit of an overpay, and they could have used that money elsewhere for a better use.
Yeah, I mean, pretty perfectly said overall. I think that I just don't like the idea of like you're locking down your backcourt for the next few years to being like pretty poor defensively. Like Luka Doncic, his defensive struggles are pretty well documented. I feel like they might even be a little overblown, but still, he's not a good defender. And then now you're adding in Austin Reeves, another guy who just isn't a great defender. So these guys have all the offensive talent in the world, of course, but defensively, there are a lot of gaps there. Now you're losing LeBron, who, of course, the defense has definitely taken a bit of a step back in these like older years of his career. Like I'll be the first to admit it, but still wouldn't be integral when needed in like the late game situations. And then adding in another factor, like you said, Marcus Smart opted out of his option today, becoming a free agent. Is he going to come back? We don't know. Honestly, I would doubt it. If with LeBron leaving, like I don't see him staying. And then another factor who like pretty much has been the rumor for the entire Lakers, like this entire offseason was like, is Rui Hachimura going to be re-signed by the Lakers or not? And we've seen him linked to the Spurs. We've seen him linked to the Nets. The Spurs may or may not end up signing him just because they brought back Harrison Barnes. So we'll see if they go for Rui or not. But Rui is a very highly touted free agent. He's a good 3-and-D guy. We saw in playoffs be very vital. So a lot of teams are going to want him. So if you even lose a guy like Rui, like this team is really going to have a lot of gaps. We saw dominating DeAndre Ayton. He got opted into his options and returning to the team. It's a lot of, to the despair of many Lakers fans. But I just don't really like this signing for Austin Reaves. I think all the offensive talent is there. Like at one point, he's averaging like 27, 28 a game before he went out later in the year. And he was playing fantastic offensively. He's a good playmaker. I just don't think that he offers enough defensive capability. And even on offense, I feel like him and Luka, there isn't a whole lot of versatility in terms of their play styles, like comparatively. They both, of course, Luka is like an otherworldly, like all-time offensive talent. Like not many players have the offensive capabilities that Luka Doncic has. But to an extent, Austin Reaves has a similar play style of like being ball dominant, being able to like play make, get to other guys. It's very similar to Luca, so that might be easy for teams to game plan against. But I think the bigger factor is I just don't like this defensively for their entire backcourt. And yeah, I guess we'll see what happens with the Lakers the rest of this offseason now that LeBron is there and the spotlight might be shifted off of LA for the first time in decades. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the speaking on like so we'll talk a little bit about LeBron opting out of that player option. So I think if you look at the Lakers in terms of their payroll and like what they have going into next season, they do have a lot of space to work with and a lot of flexibility. So right, I'm looking at their cap sheet right now, just their overview for the salary cap. Right now, they only have 8 out of 15 players roster, right? So you can get away with maybe like 14 or something like that, but they have roughly like 6 players that they can still need to sign to fill out a roster. But we've talked about that with a couple of the other teams and how little space they have to work with just to sign all those players, like the Heat and the Timberwolves, for example. But even though the Lakers have like maybe 1 or 2 more players they need to sign compared to those teams, they have a lot more space. They have $52 million in cap space left to play with, right? Obviously, with LeBron, he has a $52 million player option that he's going to be opting out of because he's going to be moving to a different team. A guy in Marcus Smart opting out of that player option that frees you up some space there. So they have a lot more projected space that they can work with now that they know LeBron's not going to be on the team. Whether or not the team is going to be better without LeBron on it, that's a different discussion. But they're going to have a lot of space if they want to be able to make moves and things like that. We know DeAndre Ayton exercised the player option. He's going to be there. So they still have a lot of space before they even reach the salary cap, a lot of space before they reach either the luxury tax or the first apron. They are hard capped at the second apron, but they're definitely not going to be getting there. And I don't have any worry about them building out the roster in terms of bringing in the requisite amount of players. I do have worry if I was a Lakers fan, just trusting Rob Pelinka to be able to build a proper team that's going to be a proper team around Luka Doncic that's going to help him win a championship. Because you haven't seen the greatest of roster building abilities from Rob Pelinka in the past. So you have a right to be worried there, I think, if you're a Lakers fan, but don't. I think you shouldn't have to be worried about like how are we going to make maneuvers to get moves. I think you can definitely make moves. It's just about making the right ones. So I guess we'll just have to see what they do in terms of filling out the roster.
Yeah. So moving to another team in the Western Conference. Let's now go to the Oklahoma City Thunder. In terms of their, we saw that they lost in the Western Conference Finals. Pretty much to the disappointment of I'd say it's a disappointing year for them. I mean, it's crazy to say their expectations are like making the finals, winning them, but that's just how good this team was going into the year, going into the playoffs. So they came up short in game 7 and a lot of questions on, are they going to move off of Lou Dort? Are they going to move some things around? Are they going to make a big move for another player? Is Isaiah Hartenstein gone? What did they do? What did they do in the draft? Because they had the lottery pick. And so a lot of things that happened. We saw them extend Isaiah Hartenstein 3 years, $87 million, which came to the surprise of a lot of fans. I think a lot of people had projected iHeart being lost to a different team and they might have to fill in that gap in the draft. And so instead, they actually, more than anything, they doubled down. They retained Isaiah Hartenstein and then they drafted the 7-3 big out of Michigan, Ade Mara. So pretty much just signaling to the league, like clearly, okay, like Wemby, like we had enough of you, like just toying with us. Like here's our not Wemby stopper, but like our Wemby slowing down person, whatever term there is for that. So they want to like build up their height, build up their paint presence because we saw Chet simply just hasn't put on the physicality that you expect from any modern big. Isaiah Hartenstein is definitely physical, but he just doesn't have the offensive capabilities to be on the court at all times. So bringing in a guy like Ade Mara should do like wonders for that team in terms of the paint. That's a very good trade. It's like, how does Sam Presti keep getting away with this man? Like he just always finds ways to make great moves for the team. And then we saw they did lose some depth pieces. They saw Isaiah Joe get traded for 2 second round picks. We saw Aaron Wiggins, the guy who saved basketball, get traded for 2 picks. So a lot of like these just small depth moves going on for the Thunder. But overall, like what do you make of these moves so far? Like what are they signaling to the league? You know, they retain Hardenstein. They picked up Dort's option. That's one thing they did for 17 mil to the either joy or despair of a lot of fans. But just what do you think about the OKC Thunder so far?
Yeah, I think these moves, I think the moves signal that they're doing their best to not go into some of the apron hell that a lot of other teams have sort of encountered. We know obviously this team with a lot of their extensions kicking in for some of their younger players. I think J Dub's extension is set to kick in after or for this upcoming season. Chet Holmgren either has one more year before his extension kicks in or kicks in this upcoming year. But just to sort of avoid having those amounts of like large contracts taking up a lot of your space, they've started to like, okay, let's move off some of these guys that we might potentially have to give larger contracts to in the next coming years. Isaiah Joe and Aaron Wiggins, those are two guys that are really key role players for them during their championship run. And those would have been guys where they probably would have had to pay larger sums of money for them in terms of extensions and in terms of rookie extensions and things like that for them to get larger salaries and for them to keep them around. So I think it's good for them to be saying, okay, we've had a really great track record with drafting these young players, even in the second round, and having them be able to be significant players that can play clutch minutes for us and critical minutes during critical games for them. So I think they're not too worried about like filling out those positions, and it's good for them that they were able to fill that. And touching on the Adai Mara pick, I think, like you mentioned, I think there's no way, especially we saw how dominant Wemby was this year, and we are not expecting him to slow down anytime soon. We're expecting him to get, if anything, be better than he was last season. So, like you mentioned, there's not going to be a Wemby stopper, but can you get at least someone that can slow him down? Can you get him, instead of having like that 40 and 20 game, can you get someone where he can stop and maybe it's like 30 and 10 or something like that? Can you just slow him down a little bit? And obviously, we see in Adai Mara, a guy that's really strong, really well built physical center that's going to be able to have the defensive capability to slow down Wemby and at least get him away from the paint. So it's someone that I think is going to free up Chet Holmgren. I think Chet Holmgren is probably the happiest person in the Thunder organization seeing that draft because it means he probably doesn't have to guard Wemby as much. He can be sort of that help side and free roamer, rim protector type thing. We saw like a lot of teams have tried that against Jokic and things like that. So I think it's a good move. I think a sequence of good moves for the Thunder, and I think it signals to the rest of the league that hey, we're not going anywhere. We're not going to have just one slight down year before we're back into this like so-called like dynasty era or something like that. And I think we're going to be. They still think they're going to be competing with the Spurs going into this season and for the next coming years. And I think these moves are definitely a good reason to believe that for the fans.
Yeah, definitely a pretty promising offseason for OKC for their fans. I'd say they haven't taken a step back and they're doing the right things to address like their shortcomings and they're definitely in the mix for being a champion next year. I think that's fair to say. So let's now go out east here and we have the Jaylen Brown saga. You know, he was rumored even like is he going to be traded for Giannis, like kind of swapping the stars there. Now obviously that isn't possible anymore. So do you think what are some like potential places you'd want to see him end up? Do you think it's best for his sake if he stays on the Celtics? What do you think is really going to happen here with Jaylen Brown?
Yeah, I think if I was him, I mean, honestly, if I was Jaylen Brown in this situation, I would be really pissed, and I can't blame him if he is. And it seems like he is. You know, like he's put out a lot of cryptic messages and stuff like
Yeah.
that on his Instagram and Twitter. So I think we can all fairly safely assume that he is um, I think he's definitely fed up with what the Celtics has been doing, which is completely fair. Like he has been proven to be offered in trades for both Kevin Durant previously in 2022 and then Giannis definitely like a week or so ago in this like Miami Heat trade. So it's been proven that there's been like real reports saying okay, he was offered in these trades. I guess the one like silver lining for Jaylen Brown that if you're the Celtics, you're trying to bring up to him and be like, hey, we're not offering to trade you just for a salary dump. We're not offering to trade you just to get draft capital in return. We're trading you. We were offering to trade you in return for like two of the 25, 30 greatest players of all time, right? Like so it's like I guess that's what the Celtics, if I were the Celtics, I'd be saying that to him like, look, we're not just offering you for anybody. We're offering you for two guys that we really thought could change the trajectory of this franchise and the history of this franchise overall. But obviously since those moves didn't get done, it doesn't mean we want you out like regardless. We still want you here. And we understand that it might have like some hard feelings based on us offering you, but know that it wasn't just for like anyone and it wasn't just for the sake of getting you off the team. It was for really good improvements and really critical improvements that we saw that could drastically improve our shot at winning the title. I think if you're Jaylen Brown, you have to recognize you have a really good shot to win another championship with the Celtics. You've previously done that. There's literally proof of concept that you can win a championship alongside Jason Tatum, and there's proven credibility that you can win multiple playoff rounds and make the finals, make the conference finals. Obviously this year they had a lead going into the game five of that first round series against the Sixers, so it looked like they had a shot to win at least one series this year, which would have been a major upset going into the season, right? Because like they didn't look like they were going to do anything after the first couple weeks of the season with the Jason Tatum injury, and the team didn't look too great. So I just think if I was Jaylen Brown, I would understandably be upset at what the Celtics were doing. And I do think I've seen a lot of people say it's more than likely he's going to get traded. In terms of teams I could see him getting traded to, there's been a lot of buzz with him going to the Trailblazers with just the recent moves they have, and I think they do have a lot of cap space. With some because some of their best players aren't on too crazy of cap numbers like Damian Lillard and Denny Avdia. They have some money saved there. So could it be a move to Portland? Could it be a move to the Wolves? We've seen like that mentioned before. I don't know how that's a possibility now with like the LaMelo Ball move. So I think that takes him out the running for it. But I think if I was Jaylen Brown, I'm not sure if there's a specific team in mind I would like to see him go to. Um, but I think it's probably best for both sides if they're to move on. Just I think it's probably reaching the point where it's becoming like untenable relationship, I would say, between the franchise and the team.
Yeah, and it's kind of a shame because like I think Jaylen Brown has now earned enough respect to the point where like it's not even fair to call him like the Robin to like Jason Tatum's Batman. Like they're not even like a 1A, 1B. They're both ones. Like they're both
Yeah.
stars. Jaylen Brown had like a first team All NBA type of season. He didn't end up getting it because of Cade and Luca getting their exceptions approved, but he would have gotten it. He's of that caliber. So he's definitely earned his respect. And I think the Celtics they may have think that he earned too much respect. They don't really realize how they think he's better than he is in terms of their trade packages. It was reported that like they're expecting a minimum of 4 first round picks in any trade package for Jaylen Brown. And so they haven't really received that much interest because 4 first round picks is like a very high asking price. So now it looks like the more likely trade package is going to be like kind of like a star for star swap. So like you said, like the Trailblazers have definitely emerged solely because they have a lot of like salary cap space and just like they're trading for stars. It would be kind of funny, like Jaylen Brown, Ja Morant, Damian Lillard. I mean, someone would have to be moved from that like young guard core that you talked about earlier, but that'd just be an interesting pairing. Some like other packages that have gone viral, like I saw one for like the Clippers where like you swap Kawhi for Jaylen Brown and like some picks and stuff like that. So it seems like at this point, like you're not going to get 4 first round picks for Jaylen Brown. It's going to be more likely something like a star for a star plus some picks, something like that. Even like the Nets have been rumored here because the Nets have a lot of picks from like the Knicks and Nuggets due to like previous trades. So the Nets have been rumored to trade for Jaylen Brown. But like at that point, you got to think like Jaylen Brown, do you want to be in Brooklyn? Like, I don't know. So it just seems like, yeah, this relationship between Boston and Jaylen Brown, it's unfortunately gone pretty south here. I don't really know if it's fixable, like you're saying, like kind of like I agree with you here. It's gone pretty down south, and I hope it's resolved because Jaylen Brown is definitely he's not the most likable player for a lot of fans. He's had his fair share of moments. We talked about his Twitch stream, his comments he's made there. Recently, he's like catching a lot of heat from fans for like him calling out like analytics and stuff like that. I think people were saying like he doesn't have that much trade value and analytically, and he's not really approving that, which I don't blame him for. So he's kind of causing a divide between a lot of the fans and him. But I mean, likability, like likable or not, like you got to admit that this man is definitely a star. And I hope for both sides that, they find the right solution, whether it's him being traded, whether it's him staying and pairing up with Jason Tatum. I guess we'll see what happens here.
Yeah, I think the last thing I think we'll mention, like the last thing on this move, one, I was just looking at it now just to see like how feasible this trade could be. I wonder if this is still trading within the conference and it would be trading to a team that's definitely going to be one of your most contending rivals for the next couple of years. So I'm not sure you would want to do this in the first place. But if Detroit could find a way to get Jaylen
Mm-hmm.
Brown to be a the side star, I think he would clearly be the one B in this case to Cade Cunningham. Um, Not similar to how like him and Jason Tatum I think are on equal footing. I think it would be pretty. evident that he'd have to take the second star role, but if he's comfortable doing that, like he has been in the last couple of years in Boston, I think if the Pistons could find a way to get him, that would be an interesting move. You would have to make it work, I think, in terms of a sign and trade. You'd probably have to re-sign Jalen Duren and then use that as an asset in the trade because otherwise the salaries aren't going to match because they don't have too many large salaries on the roster other than Cade Cunningham. Obviously, you're not trading. With Jalen Brown's salary is 57 million. Right now, their biggest salaries outside of Cade Cunningham are Karis LeVert and Asar Thompson. Asar Thompson definitely not a guy you want to trade. Karis LeVert you could probably afford to trade there. He's an older guard that I'm sure you'd be fine moving off of. Ron Holland, a guy that's been mentioned in a lot of trades. I've heard him being mentioned as trades with the Bucks and things like that. On my potential Tyler Hero swap. So that's just one. I was just looking at a potential idea. The trade like seems to work if you throw in a couple like of the lower end guys on like ESPN's trade machine. So we'll see. That's just a move I was just thinking about. Could be a good move for the Pistons, and I could see something like that working out. But I guess we'll see what happens with Jaylen Brown.
Yeah, that's actually like interestingly enough, that's definitely a destination that I was thinking about would be like pretty perfect because I mean we saw this year is very evident in both playoff series. Like the Pistons, they just lack a lot of offensive firepower. Like outside of Cade, it's literally no one. And not only do they need like a scorer, but they also could also benefit from like another ball handler. Like Dennis Jenkins is like the only other guard that can really bring the ball up the court, and even he kind of regressed once Cade returned from his like lung collapse injury. So Jaylen Brown would fit both those roles. He's a very good scorer, and he can handle the ball to an extent, bring the ball up the court, be a maybe not more of like an ISO scorer than a playmaker, but still someone that can like handle the load in the non-Cade ball handling minutes. So that would be a good fit. I guess we'll see if like the Celtics want to bite the bullet and trade to like another contender, but that aside, like I could see that happening, being a good fit for both teams.
Yeah. So I think that's gonna wrap it up for most of the moves we wanted to talk about for today's episode. Obviously, we still know there's a lot to be done. One of the biggest moves we didn't talk about potentially happening with LeBron James, mostly because we want to leave that for now because I think we're gonna have a decision on that one soon. So we'll touch on that a little bit in the next episode. And with free agency starting, any other moves that we see coming up soon, we'll talk about those. So